All right, Zach, we are here. We are in championship week, fantasy football championship week. Congratulations if you have made it to your championship. The job is not finished.
Right.
Okay, you probably made it. You might have won a little bit of prize money for being second place, but you will not be second place. Okay, we're not here for that. We're here for first place. We're going for it all. Okay, don't mess around. This is our waiver wire show for week 17, our final waiver wire show for this season, which is crazy to say. 17 weeks of this now, Zach.
Yeah.
It's been fun, but the job is not done.
Yeah.
I'm in the championship in one of our leagues together, the only league that matters.
Aptly named.
Yeah, absolutely. So that should be fun. I was already trash talking with the other guy in the championship round this morning because he does listen to the podcast. And, just so you guys know, a lot of the information in this podcast will be incorrect and wrong just to throw him off just a little bit. Okay. I'm just kidding. Okay. So
listen for subliminal messaging during the podcast.
Exactly. So, we have a lot to talk about, this week. There's a lot of guys you can pick up, and potentially put in your lineup. Obviously, I hear the argument all the time, like, oh, if you're playing this guy in the playoffs, you're going to lose. Like, listen, there's a lot of turnover, right? Like, people are plugging people in and you got to win, you move on and you still kind of you might have some holes on your roster. Even in championship week, it happens. Injuries and, there's a lot of things that can happen. And if you've been streaming properly, if you've been picking guys up and throwing them in and you've been doing it properly, like you probably have a good chance of winning regardless if you don't have your studs, right?
Yeah.
Like anything can happen any given week. So sometimes the worst teams are in the championship. In this case, it's not the case. The two best teams.
Of course, yes.
Of course, have made it to the championship. But, we're going to still need to pick up some players on the waiver wire this week. And, let's get it popping. If you're not starting anybody, whoever you're not starting, just drop them, and pick up a bunch of these guys.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about last night's game real quick, though, dude.
Boring.
Austin Eckler. Yeah, boring game for sure. Yeah. But Austin Eckler came through.
Yep.
2 big touchdowns. You probably needed a little bit of that if you had Eckler, because he's probably a big part of why your team, is in the playoffs. And 2 big touchdowns. That's awesome. Keenan Allen came through with 20 PPR points without even scoring. 11 for 104. Since coming back from injury in week 11, Keenan Allen is the PPR wide receiver 6. And in his last 3 games, he's averaging 10 catches for 94 yards. So he had 14 targets in this game. That accounted for 45% of Justin Herbert's targets. And we mentioned that this might be the case because they were missing Kenny Moore. But yeah, Keenan Allen, he didn't help you early on, but he's helping you punch tickets to the fantasy championship.
Yeah, and he's showing you what you missed out on all season. He's just a PPR machine. He's not going to be fantastic for non-PPR, but in PPR, which I imagine is the new standard scoring at this point. He's been fantastic, nothing short of fantastic. In a game where Justin Herbert puts up 6 fantasy points, doesn't throw a touchdown, he only throws for 235 yards, 45% target share, and over 100 yards receiving. Like, Keenan Allen's the guy, in this Chargers passing attack. And Justin Herbert dials into him anytime he's on the field. So it's great to see him back and doing his thing. This is pretty much what we expected all season. His ceiling is there if he can score. He hasn't done a whole lot of that, but the floor has been so fantastic, like you said, with the target share going his way. And he catches a lot of the passes. It's not like he's getting a bunch of targets and catching 4 or 5 of them. He's catching double digit pretty much every week. So Keenan Allen, he was excellent last night. He seems to be the safest wide receiver by far of the guys on the Chargers. Mike Williams, he had a semi-okay game. It could have been better. We didn't see much of the scoring, like I said, last night. I was expecting a bigger game overall, but at least he was able to get a couple targets and, salvage his day. And Josh Palmer, he kind of just didn't do a whole lot. But that makes sense when Keenan Allen has 14 targets, and Justin Herbert doesn't throw any touchdowns. So overall, those are the takeaways. Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen got it done. But Keenan Allen especially, he's been fantastic since he came back.
Gerald Everett, big fat 0 for you in your semifinals. He's had a solid floor all season long. He doesn't show his ceiling much. Yeah. The floor was there every single week, except when it mattered most. So I can
Yeah,
totally see, some people depending on Gerald Everett last night just to get them, a few points, maybe 5 or 6 PPR points to win it for them. 0.
I could imagine that happening. I actually had that happen to me in another league. I was in a consolation bracket in this league, and it didn't matter. I had one out of the toilet bowl in that league, but I had Gerald Everett and Nick Foles. They needed to combine for 3 points.
Oh my God.
Nick Foles finished with negative points, and Gerald Everett had 0. So it didn't matter, but I'm sure there are some horror stories out there about moving on to the championship and people relying on Nick Foles and Gerald Everett, and it just didn't come through for them. So, if that happened to you, I'm feeling for you tonight and today. I mean.
Oh my God. That's terrible, man. I started Nick Foles in a 2-quarterback league.
Yeah, I did too.
That didn't work out. That didn't work out
No.
so well. No,
he didn't
not at all.
look like the Nick Foles that we knew. It was pretty
No, 3 interceptions. This offense couldn't get anything going at all.
No. Nothing.
Zach Moss was the answer, by the way. If you were trying to decide between him and Deion Jackson,
Right.
Zach Moss was the answer. Kind of what we expected. I think he's still a flex play next week, because we know that he's the guy in the backfield. He's pretty much playing a role on early downs, on passing downs, short yardage. So he's in play once again against the Giants next week, even though, he didn't have a good fantasy day last night, and this offense did not look good at all. But, this could be a closer game than you think against the Giants next week. And, he's still in play in the flex. He was I think he was like our RB 28 or something like that. He was like a mid RB 3, something like that going into this week. So I'm glad we weren't too high on him. But going into next week, somewhere around RB 30, RB 31, something like that.
Yeah.
Most likely.
I mean, you look at the offense he's on. We weren't expecting humongous things from him anyway. I think this is kind of what I envisioned. And we talked about that, obviously with the ranking. But the workload was there. It's not like he's splitting very much at all with Deion Jackson. He's obviously the guy in the backfield. So that's a good thing. If you picked him up on the waivers, even though he didn't put out a ton of points this week, he could definitely do some things next week. Obviously they were playing from behind pretty much the whole time. The offense couldn't get anything going. I don't imagine we see Nick Foles under center again. I mean, maybe they make another change unless other quarterbacks aren't healthy. But Zach Moss, I'm okay starting him as a flex, like you said, too, because of that workload being there. I think he would have had a lot more carries if they weren't just playing from behind. They were in a negative game script all game.
I have no idea what the Colts are going to do at quarterback next week. No
idea. Does it matter?
Like,
I mean, at this point, they're just trying to make it through the season.
You can't bring in Matt Ryan back because they basically said that Nick Foles is going to start the rest of the way.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know what they do.
I'm guessing Nick Foles
is the quarterback. He was so bad. He was so bad.
I mean, I would go back to Matt Ryan just to be semi-competitive. At least he gave them a 33-point lead. And then they went away from him, obviously, in the second half of that game against the Vikings last week. But I've thought the entire time that Matt Ryan gives them the best chance to win. I don't think they're a good team right now anyway. They need to answer questions at quarterback, but it's not like that's going to be addressed this season. So at this point, I would just put Matt Ryan back in. You paid him. That's that contract that he got. He's on your team for the rest of this season. You don't have to deal with him next season if you don't want to. For the sake of fantasy football, I hope the Colts coaches are listening to this. Just please put Matt Ryan back in so we can have some fantasy relevance.
Agreed. Yeah, but the pass game did not look good. Michael Pittman, I guess still in play as a wide receiver 3, maybe a low-end wide receiver 3 if Nick Foles is starting. But I would not be confident in that next week.
No.
All right, let's get into the waiver wire. Let's get it popping. Let's do it. Yep. Final one. Shedding a tear. Super sad. Let's get it popping. Tyler Allgeier at number 1. We spoke about Allgeier yesterday, but he has now taken the lead, a legit lead, in the Falcons' backfield. 50-50 split, up until this past weekend. But he had a 23-9 lead on Patterson in terms of opportunities in this game. 18 carries, 5 targets. He has Arizona this week, so that's a great matchup. He's right at the borderline of being 50% rostered on Yahoo. He's mostly rostered on Sleeper, close to 70%, but he's widely available on ESPN. So, if he's available, grab him, right? Start him. If you're not starting him, just grab him and put him on your bench so that your opponent can't get him. But in most competitive leagues, he probably won't be available. But in yours, he might be.
Yeah. No, I like Tyler Allgeier as a guy a lot this week, to pick up the waiver wire out of the week because he had that, receiving workload a little bit. We saw that in the past couple of weeks. He was over 50% route participation, which was pretty cool. But then you also talk about him, out snapping and out pacing Cordarrelle Patterson touches on the ground too. it looks really good for him, like you said, especially with the matchup coming up. It's not fantastic. It's pretty good matchup. It's not like fantastic, but I think Cordell Patterson at this point is taking a backseat to Tyler Allgeier. I thought they might lean into this youth movement a little bit. It looks like they are in Atlanta because there's not much else they can do with this season. It looks like it's either going to be the Panthers or the Buccaneers coming out of the South. But I think as long as Tyler Allgeier is getting this type of workload, you can't ignore it. I'd be surprised if he was still sitting on the waiver wire. We had him on our waiver wire last week too, and he was pretty high. Yeah. So
we had him on the waiver wire for weeks now.
Yeah, but even then, he wasn't getting this type of workload. Like these past 2 weeks, they've ramped him up huge, and it looks like he's going to continue to get that the rest of the way, albeit only 1 week.
Yeah, no, one more week, but it's a good matchup too. So this is good timing for sure if you have Allgeier. I got DJ Chark at number 2 here. Outside of the Jets game, where no one should have started him, he's averaging 100 yards receiving in the other 3 games out of the last 4. And now the Lions get Chicago. And Chicago has actually been very good against perimeter wide receivers who line up on the left side. And that is where Chark runs most of his perimeter routes from. But Chark still runs almost 60% of his routes overall away from the left perimeter, out of the slot and the right side. So, and that's coming into last week. So Chicago has given up the 7th most and the 5th most fantasy points to those 2 spots respectively over the last 4 weeks. So there's still an opportunity for Chark to continue that production this week.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at it, we knew that he wasn't going to do very well against the Jets 2 weeks ago, and that came to fruition. Like we said yesterday on the podcast, we were talking about it. He's been one of the easiest ones to project and predict this season, I think, especially on this tail end of it. But I think you also look at the game script that this might be. I think this could be a high-scoring game. Obviously the Lions are fighting for their playoff lives, and the Bears are scrappy. They had a tough time against the Bills last week with Justin Fields having his first dud, but I don't expect Justin Fields to keep failing, like he did last week. I think that he's going to have a bounce back game. He has that rushing ability. We saw what he did the last time they played the Lions. It's going to come down to that. If it's going to be a high scoring game, I see DJ Chark, hitting that 100-yard threshold pretty easily. And a touchdown, that might be in the cards too. And when he scores a touchdown, it's always long. So I think you're looking at DJ Chark as a really nice pickup. He's been on the waiver wire too a while. So I would definitely pick him up. He's been on a nice streak outside of that Jets game, like you said.
Jahan Dotson, I have him at 3 here. He is not available on sleeper in most leagues, but he is widely available on other platforms. 2 top 10 finishes each of the last 2 weeks. Top 20 finished the game before that. He's on a roll right now. And he gets Cleveland this week, whose perimeter defense, hasn't been great, but perimeter wide receivers usually don't go off on them, right? So they've been like holding them, to their floor for the most part, I would say. The only wide receiver, who has really gone off lately, only perimeter wide receiver who has really gone off lately has been Jamar Chase, right? And the last time it happened before that was Mike Williams back in week 5. So the matchup is all right. There might be a quarterback change to Carson Wentz. And even though Wentz to Dotson, that connection was fine earlier in the year, those touchdowns earlier in the year, they were against Jacksonville, Detroit, and then Dallas out of the slot against Anthony Brown. So good matchups all around, when he did end up doing his thing early on in the year with Carson Wentz. So that's why I'm preferring DJ Chark just slightly over Dotson this week if I had to choose between the 2.
Yeah, I think that's a fair analysis. I do like Jahan Dotson, though. His route participation was up to 97% last week. He actually out-targeted Terry McLaurin, and I don't know if that has to do with Carson Wentz coming in or not. We were looking at that, but I think with Carson Wentz in, we saw him earlier in the season. They had a pretty good connection. I think that could actually boost his value a little bit more, too. I think he's going to be a contributor on this team regardless. It's not like not Kyle Allen. I don't know why I'm talking about the old backup quarterbacks, the Commanders. But Taylor Heineke, it's not like Heineke was a humongous drop-off for Jahan Dotson. Obviously, those first 3 weeks where he came back from injury looked bad, and I was kind of buying into that. I was like, okay, it doesn't look like Heineke's targeting him. But then he came back. He was ending up targeting him. He just wasn't participating on the route tree a whole lot. But now we have Jahan Dotson. He looks good again. I think he's on a roll. I don't think it's going to matter who starts at quarterback. He should be able to get it done. But I do agree that DJ Chark is a better play. It makes sense to have him higher than Jahan Dotson this week.
Yeah, and part of the reason why I think McLaurin was out targeted in this game, it's just because the 49ers have played a lot better on their right side and on the offense's left side against perimeter wide receivers. That's where Terry McLaurin runs most of his routes from. They've given up the third least fantasy points to McLaurin's side over the course of the season. So
Right.
they've been stout on that side. And, like we talked about coming in, that's why we like Dotson coming into last week, just because of the matchup in the slot and the right perimeter. That's really where, the 49ers have let up a little bit this season. So I understand why that happened this week. Not super surprised about it.
Yeah.
So I got Romeo Doubs here at number 4. He's here, number 1, because the Packers have Minnesota this week.
Yep.
And he ran most of his routes on that left side that we keep talking about against Minnesota, right? He ran most of his routes on that side this past week. So he's also this high because Christian Watson's hip injury, right? And,
Yeah.
If Christian Watson's out, Allen Lazard is obviously rostered everywhere. So Doubs would be the replacement if Watson can't go. He did replace Watson in his role when Watson left the game in that second half that was on Sunday, right? Yeah, on Sunday. So if Watson does go, I think Doubs is still in flex consideration for upside in this matchup. But if Watson doesn't go, I'm going to try to get Doubs in my lineup like somehow, some way.
Yeah. I think he's a slam dunk if Christian Watson doesn't play. Obviously Romeo Doubs, we have him under guys like Jahan Dotson and DJ Chark. I assume that's because of that, ambiguity regarding Christian Watson's status. But I think you're pretty safe playing him regardless, even if Watson does go, because of that Minnesota Vikings matchup. It's perfect. Like, this is the perfect storm that you want. If you can get Christian Watson being out and the Vikings defense in the same week with Romeo Doubs, like, this guy on the waiver wire, he could be humongous. He could win some fantasy championships, I think, definitely. I'm not sure if the ceiling is going to be like 30 points, but we've seen guys like we just talked about yesterday, Isaiah Hodgins and Richie James, who are further down this list. They were getting it done against the Vikings defense. Like, I thought maybe there would be a little consolation for the Vikings defense there, that they could stop somebody, but that clearly isn't the case. And we talked about that left side, like you said, they're just letting up a ton of fantasy points that way. It doesn't take a whole lot to see that this would be a really good pickup if you could get him, especially if everything falls into place the way we just outlined it.
So I picked up Romeo Doubs a couple weeks ago. I have Christian Watson on this team, that I'm in the championship with, and I have Watson and I have Doubs. So if Watson doesn't play, obviously I'll put Doubs in, right? But if Watson does play, like, I'm still gonna consider Doubs, in my flex, just for a little bit of upside. I still feel like he's still a decent play, even if Watson can't go, especially if Watson has a chance to be limited, right? It's possible that we see Watson limited all week, come into the game, and then him not get a full complement of snaps. That could happen too. He might not need it because any given play he can score a touchdown. But something to keep an eye on this week. But at the end of the day, I'm just hoping Christian Watson plays, dude. You know what I'm saying? Against Minnesota, like, you do not want, like, you look at that matchup and you're just like, man, come on. You got to play.
And he has to get redemption for that missed catch earlier in the season. You know what I'm saying? That would just be the storyline right there. But with Romeo Doubs, say Christian Watson doesn't go, do you think he could be like a sneaky DFS play, Romeo Doubs?
I feel like he won't even be sneaky. Like, I feel like he's going to be chalk.
Okay.
No, I feel like he'll be chalk. Like, I feel like a lot of people, because he's going to be so cheap. I imagine he's sub 4K on DraftKings. He might be sub 3K, possibly.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I got to check. But I'm guessing like on DraftKings he'll be sub 4K, and he'll be in a lot of lineups, right? Yeah. I would say that Lazard might be less owned, less rostered, have a lower roster percentage than Doubs, because Lazard's price will be higher.
Yeah. I think that would make total sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to pick up Romeo Doubs really easily. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think in DFS, Lazard might be the sneaky play. It's weird, though, because it's just like, well, Lazard led them in targets last week. Wouldn't you play Lazard? Like, I don't know. The price would be so attractive for Romeo Doubs next week.
We've seen Lazard. He gets a lot of targets, but sometimes he doesn't do a whole lot with it. He can get a lot of targets.
Well, listen, man, before Christian Watson, came into the picture, like, Lazard was killing it, dude. Like, before Christian Watson came into the picture, let's take a look real quick, dude. Let's take a quick look. I'm gonna tee off his fantasy performances in a row. 14 points, 17, 13, 17, 11, 18. All right. And then Christian Watson kind of came on at that point in week 10. So, he was pretty consistent, and he was scoring touchdowns.
Solid. Yeah.
Yeah. And against Minnesota this week, Lazard's going to be in my lineup.
Yeah,
He's
that
going to
makes
be in
sense.
the lineup this week.
Of course.
Regardless of whether Christian Watson is playing or not. And if he's not playing, obviously he'll definitely be in there for sure. All right, let's move on. We spoke about Zach Moss earlier. I have him here at number 5, just in case you need a running back. He's probably my favorite. So I have 3 running backs here. Obviously Allgeier is the running back pickup of the week if he's available. But if he's not available, we have Zach Moss here in this top 10 at number 5. We have Chuba Hubbard at 8. Well, I have Chuba Hubbard at 8. I want to get Zach's opinion on this. And then I have Gus Edwards at 10.
Yeah.
Would you prefer to pick up Zach Moss this week over guys like Chuba Hubbard and Gus Edwards?
Yeah, I think so. He's in line for, we want to call it number 1 workload.
He's the primary back.
Yeah, the talent isn't fantastic. The situation, the offense he's on is not very good, but he's going to get the volume, and I think that's a safer bet than Chuba Hubbard. He didn't have fantastic volume last week. He ran for 125 yards, though. So I don't expect that to happen every week. And Gus Edwards, he's been, he's splitting carries all season with J.K. Dobbins and stuff. I'm not too worried about him having a huge game over Zach Moss. So I would definitely go Zach Moss.
I agree.
But definitely pay attention to these running backs, though, because I don't know if you heard, the rumors are out that Derrick Henry might not play this week. So you might need to replace him. He's dealing with a hip injury, and they play on Thursday. Yeah,
we have Hassan Haskins down at 20 here.
Right.
So keep that in mind. Now, I have him down at 20. I would have him higher if Malik Willis wasn't their quarterback. Will they be able to move the ball?
Right.
That's my only concern. Hassan Haskins isn't necessarily a 1-for-1 replacement with Derrick Henry. If Tannehill was playing, I would feel way more confident, and he'll probably be in the top 10 here, to be honest with you, just to pick him up, because you never know, right? And Derrick Henry, he didn't practice yesterday, like you said, so it could be a situation where Henry's out this week.
Yeah, I like any of these. Like Tyler Allgeier would be my ideal 1-for-1 placement because, for obvious reasons, we have him as a number 1. But you could also get by with Zach Moss, I think. Chuba Hubbard in a pinch. Gus Edwards is where I draw the line. I'm like, okay, maybe I want to look elsewhere or figure something else out.
I agreed. The thing with Zach Moss is that he doesn't really have a cap on his workload. Yeah. Right. And that's kind of why I have him here at number 5. Like, he can easily get 20 carries, next week against the Giants.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Giants, I have Isaiah Hodgins here at number 6. Coming into last night, the Colts were giving up the 2nd most fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers over the last 4 weeks and the 8th most over the last 8 weeks. So Hodgins has a great matchup, and he's now had 3 top 24 finishes in his last 4 games. So, you got to keep an eye on that. And then I have Richie James, his teammate, at 7. The Colts have also been vulnerable out of the slot lately because they've been missing Kenny Moore. And that's part of the reason, like we mentioned earlier, part of the reason why Keenan Allen was just like a target funnel last night, more than 40% of target share.
Yeah.
So if Kenny Moore's out again, Richie James should be in consideration to play as like a PPR wide receiver 3. If Kenny Moore plays, I would not play Richie James because they've been stout with Kenny Moore in their nickel spot when he does end up actually playing.
So say Richie James gets not Kenny Moore. Do you think he's a better play than Isaiah Hodgins this week?
I think he's more reliable, I would say, in PPR.
The floor might be safer.
I think so.
I think both of these guys are really good upside plays, against the Colts. That's what they were last week, obviously against Minnesota, and they came through. That actually gives me a little bit of confidence for them. I wasn't sure how confident I would be coming out of that matchup, but they both got it done with Daniel Jones at quarterback. And obviously, quarterback situation in Indianapolis is perfect. What am I talking about? Indianapolis, New England, New York. It's the same quarterback situation, but I like these guys this week. Obviously, last week it was going to set the bar and see what my expectations for them would be this week. I think it's pretty high. I think they're both really good flex plays. You can have them at your wide receiver 3, and I think that Richie James, like you said, if that matchup goes right, he might have wide receiver 2 upside. We'll see how it goes.
I can see it. Chuba Hubbard, mentioned him already. He's at number 8 here. The Panthers, they were up all game this past week against the Lions, so they didn't really have to throw a whole lot. He didn't get any targets, but he is their primary pass catching back in that backfield if it gets down to that. But they're going up against the Bucs this week, right? And there could be enough overall volume to go around for both him and Deontay Foreman. This is crazy. Okay. This goes to show that the Bucs don't really like to score that many points. Tampa is now the 5th lowest. Excuse me. I'm so shocked here. Okay.
Yeah.
Tampa is now the 5th lowest scoring team in the NFL on a per game basis.
Yeah. And
Can you believe that?
There's a stat that I saw. They've gone over 23 points once this season. That's it.
Oh my God.
Like, that's bad for a Tom Brady offense. And with the weapons they have, like, it's just not adding up how that's working.
That's brutal.
Yeah. So I think regardless, like you said, of how this game goes, the running backs are going to be viable. There's going to be no negative game script for either team, I don't think, unless the Panthers come out swinging and rush for another 300 yards on the Buccaneers. They're going to be involved regardless. So I do like Chuba Hubbard, definitely. He's close to Zach Moss. It's just the fact that he's splitting carries. And Raheem Blackshear coming in and vulturing touchdowns is not convenient at all. Don't know what that's about. But yeah, he's going to be a thorn in the side for anybody who has Chuba Hubbard or Deontay Foreman. They both got it done last week, but in games where they're not rushing for 320 yards, that's going to come through and be troublesome for someone that has Chuba Hubbard. So I think having him here at 8 under guys like Zach Moss, like you said, and Tyler Allgeier makes sense. But I think he's a really nice play because of that receiving work. We didn't see any of that last week. And like you said, can't be surprised when you're running for that many yards. They're just going to keep pounding the rock.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right. Let's see. Juwan Johnson here at number 9. He's just a touchdown machine. Pretty much. He's not going to be dealing with the elements this week, right? He does have a really tough matchup though against Philly. But at the end of the day, you don't have that many options at tight end. He's still a good streamer because he's been that touchdown machine. You also have Chris Olave banged up right now with a hamstring injury. Who knows if he's going to play this week? We'll see what the practice reports look like tomorrow. But if Chris Olave is out, then Juwan Johnson becomes an even better play.
Yeah, he's a good play, I think, regardless, as long as the weather isn't like it was last week. Especially with the tight end landscape the way it is. He was a touchdown machine, and we talked about this yesterday. You just want to take guys that are on touchdown streaks and just hope for the best. He had his bad game. He should be able to come back. Dawson Knox is the same kind of player. He's on a touchdown streak right now. You can maybe stream him. But Juwan Johnson, he's been much more consistent as far as contributing to the offense than Dawson Knox this season, especially with Chris Olave out, like you said. There's not many pass catchers left for Andy Dalton to go to. So I like Juwan Johnson here at 9 at tight end. You mentioned it's a tough matchup against Philly, but I think they can get it done.
I feel like there's no reason for the Saints. Like, do you think there's any reason for the Saints to play Chris Olave?
No.
Like, is there any?
I wouldn't.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean, unless
like, why try to re-aggravate?
Yeah. Plus, even if they would try to make the playoffs, if that's what you're talking about, like, are they going to go anywhere? Like, no. They're not going to do anything in the playoffs. With Chris Olave, there's no reason. I just let him get through this season. Maybe rest him the rest of the way. Just start new next season. Hopefully, they have a quarterback at that point that he can work with. Kind of grow with in his second year.
It's part of the reason why we have Rashid Shaheed at number 16, just in case Chris Olave is out.
Yeah.
Again, you know what I mean? Because he could end up doing something this week against Philly. Let's see. But it is a tough matchup, though, right? Obviously, Philly on the perimeter, they're pretty tough.
Yeah.
Now, let's see. Gus Edwards at number 10 here, just a running back who can give you 10 to 15 touches, right? If Lamar plays, he gets an upgrade. Nothing really else to say there. You know what I'm saying? He was efficient this past week, but expect somewhere between like 40 and 70 yards on the ground, something like that. If he scores, great.
Yeah, he's good for the same amount of work and pretty much the same production every week. And that upside comes with the touchdowns. That's kind of what J.K. Dobbins has been too. Dobbins, I'd say, is a low end RB2 with upside. Gus Edwards is a high end RB3 with upside. That's pretty much how I look at this. I'm not like,
and I think it's because that it's because J.K. Dobbins gets the first crack at the touchdowns.
Right.
Pretty much.
And I'm not excited about either of these guys in my lineup, but definitely if you need somebody to just fill in, you can get by. It's not going to be fantastic, but you're not going to be left hanging. And that's really all you can ask for.
I got Greg Dortch at number 11. Will Greg Dortch play in the slot this week? Who knows? He magically reappeared, sending Hollywood to the outside. He ended up with 11 targets and 3 carries. And, this type of opportunity, like whenever he's playing in the slot, he gets it. But, was it because Hollywood was a little bit banged up coming into the game? Who the hell knows, dude? He's a boom bust play for me this week. He has a floor of 0. He might not even get any snaps in this game. Just like the past couple weeks, he was hardly on the field. He didn't play. But he can also potentially get you 8 catches too. So like complete boom bust, really hard to trust this week. But, they do go up against Atlanta, they haven't been good against slot wide receivers. So if he is their slot wide receiver this week, he's going to have a good day. We just don't know what the hell is going to happen.
I don't know. I might be calling a bust here this week for Greg Dortch. You can pick him up. I'm not excited about starting him. I'd be kind of disappointed if I have to start him. But this is the thing. I don't know if Trace McSorley is going to be starting if Colt McCoy comes back, but at this point, I'm clamoring for Colt McCoy. Who would have thought that we'd be asking for him to come back? Because
Please come
DeAndre
back.
Hopkins had 1 catch last week, and Marquise Brown was more of the same. He didn't have a very good day. It wasn't 1 catch; it was a couple catches. Obviously, Greg Dortch. It's good to see him back, but I think, like I said, that kind of goes with Trace McSorley. They probably have a little bit more connection than the other guys. You don't want to bake it down just to that, but I think that's a big reason why. If we can see Colt McCoy come back, that top heavy target distribution, I think, will kind of resurrect. And this week, it'll be more of a better play for DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown than Greg Dortch this week. So I think that this is kind of a blip on the radar. I mean, obviously, like we said, he's boom bust. That's what you expect from somebody who is boom bust or blip on the radar. But this week, not a humongous fan. I think if Colt McCoy comes back, we might see him return to that 0-point floor pretty easily.
Yeah. And I got Tyler Conklin here at 12, with Mike White back this week. Good matchup against the Seahawks. All the wide receivers have tough matchups against the Seahawks. Seahawks have been very stout against wide receivers this year, especially lately. So, some targets can potentially funnel Conklin's way this week with Mike White back. So, he's another good tight end pickup. I think him and Juwan Johnson would be the main tight end pickups this week. And then we got Mac Hollins at 13. He's just one of those like wide receivers that just stay on the waiver wire. Yep. If you need somebody, you can pick him up. I forgot who the Raiders were playing this week, but it was a decent matchup.
The Raiders are playing San Fran this week.
Yeah, San Fran, exactly. So Mac Hollins, runs most of his routes on that right side, where Jahan Dotson did his thing. Like that's where he's running his routes from on that side. So there is a little bit of upside here for Mac Hollins this week. And then you got Corey Davis at 14. I have Elijah Moore also down at 19. Between those two guys, like I think I trust Corey Davis more. Just keep in mind this is a tough matchup, right, against the Seahawks. But with Mike White back, I can see obviously the play is, the only guy you can really trust right now is Garrett Wilson. And by the way, yes, he is going to be a top 15 wide receiver play for me this week because Mike White is back. Regardless. But between Corey Davis and Elijah Moore, with Davis back healthy, I kind of just trust him more, dude, at this point.
Yeah, he's a veteran. He's going to be able to get open. Elijah Moore has been he went up to that route participation that was promising. But I think Corey Davis has a better chance to have a better day this week. As long as Mike White is playing, you can like re-add these guys. You probably dropped them when you saw that Zach Wilson was coming back to play. And then now that he's out, you can pick them back up. I think they're all upside plays because if Mike White gets things going, they've been a very good passing offense, lots of yards, targets to go around, and you can kind of rely on that if you need to. But it's a tough matchup.
These are playoff games for the Jets. They have to win out. So the way that the Jets are going to get in is if they win out, and then either I think it's the Dolphins have to lose or the Patriots have to lose. It's one or the other, something like that. I forgot what it was. But they have to win out regardless. Yeah,
and Mike White couldn't be coming back at a better time for that because the offense has just been anemic these past few weeks. So I think Mike White comes back. Like the only reason I'm happy taking these guys and putting them on my bench, I'm not necessarily sticking them in my lineup and being happy about it, but if I have to, Mike White is the reason that I'm okay with that. If this were Zach Wilson again, or maybe even, I think if Joe Flacco were playing too, I would be all right. I wouldn't be as worried about it, but anything but Zach Wilson. And you could say, okay, they have some upside this week. So I like Corey Davis and Elijah Moore if you need to. Mike White is the determining factor.
Yeah, I can see that. I have Russell Gage here at 15, really just a desperate play. Julio Jones has been banged up. So Russell Gage has stepped in and he's, had 2 decent games over the past 2 weeks. He had 3 touchdowns in his last 3 games, 5 catches each of the last 2 games. So he's like a PPR flex play, if you need him, but, completely boom bust. He has a floor of 0. Don't want to trust him, but if you have to, if you're in a deeper league, Russell Gage is somebody who's widely available and can potentially, do some things only in PPR though. Even though he scored a couple touchdowns before this past week, like I don't really trust him to keep being that red zone target for Tom Brady.
I don't either. I don't understand why he's.
And remember, they also don't really score that much.
Yeah, they don't. Like we said, but they haven't gone over 23 points except for one time this season. So that touchdown.
Can I ask you a question, Zach?
Yeah.
Who are you playing more? Who are you playing this week? Mike Evans or Russell Gage? If Julio's out.
Oh, it's so tough. Who would think this would be a tough question? Coming into the season. I think I'm going with Mike Evans. It's just the way it is. Russell Gage is a spot start and just a Hail Mary, if you need it. I'm not taking Mike Evans out at this point. I think he has a better chance of showing up than Russell Gage does, but I get why
just the way you
question,
say Russell Gage.
I get
Gage.
Yeah, I get why it's a question. I completely understand because Russell Gage has had 2 very good games relative to Mike. It just doesn't look like Mike Evans is going to do a whole lot the rest of the season. But I trust Mike Evans, even though it's very hard to have a bigger game than Russell Gage at this point.
I get it. That's funny. So we had Rashid Shaheed at 16, just in case Chris Olave is out. Still a tough matchup for him, but he can burn any corner in the league. Noah Fant at 17. He had he was nowhere to be found last week. In that game, he ended up luckily scoring a touchdown late against Kansas City. Yeah, the only touchdown, for Geno Smith. So, he's somebody you can plug in this week because the Jets, they're very good against perimeter wide receivers, but they have let up against tight ends lately and this year in general. So Noah Fant can potentially be somebody that you stream this week. But and I think a lot of it has to do with him being a little bit banged up coming into the game. So if he gets some full practices this week, I think you can be a little bit more confident plugging him in your lineup because he was kind of like a game day decision of whether he was going to be active or not going into last week. So just keep that in mind.
It wasn't a very promising, stat line that we saw. You see, he puts up 9 PPR points. Like you figure that's like 4 catches for 50-some yards. No, there was a touchdown in there, so he wasn't getting a whole lot of looks. The workload wasn't there. You mentioned his injury; that could be contributing to it. But I'm not sure how much I trust the Seahawks offense anymore at this point. I mean, Kenneth Walker, he's going to be carrying the ball, but outside of that, DK Metcalf, he's been all right, but Geno Smith isn't distributing the ball as well. We saw that the first game without Tyler Lockett didn't look good. Do we know if Tyler Lockett's playing this week? Because if they get him back,
no, we don't.
I might be more inclined to play Noah Fant if Tyler Lockett comes back, just because it seems like Geno is a better quarterback when Tyler Lockett's on the field. So just something that I'm going to keep an eye on this week. Obviously, you can't chalk it up to that, but Noah Fant, I don't think the workload is there enough. The offense wasn't scoring enough touchdowns at all without Tyler Lockett for me to say I can start him over other guys like Tyler Conklin this week.
Right. No, I get that. I think Fant, if he gets some full practices in, he'll get more targets this week against the Jets because I don't know how many targets DK Metcalf is going to get against that perimeter defense.
We'll see.
It'll be interesting to see.
DK Metcalf is a good receiver. I don't think the matchup is going to scare him away or cause him to have a horrific game. But we've seen DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner shut guys down before.
I'm going to say that DK Metcalf falls outside the top 24 this week.
Is that your bold prediction? Or you think it's not too bold?
I don't even know if it's that bold.
All right. So you're confident in your guys. I like it. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll see. So I got Michael Gallup here at number 18. Gallup has been obviously, on and off, right?
Yep.
Like he's just somebody that you could throw into your flex if you're desperate. But he had a decent game this past week. He had that touchdown. But the main reason why I'm interested in picking him up if I'm desperate is because they play the Titans this week. And, Titans have not been good against perimeter wide receivers. This past week, I love CeeDee Lamb because of how good Philly is on the perimeter and how not so great they've been against slot wide receivers. So CeeDee Lamb was able to do his thing, and he did. But this week, it's kind of the opposite, where CeeDee Lamb, doesn't have the best matchup in the world, but Michael Gallup and Noah Brown do. So that's the reason why I like Michael Gallup. I'm assuming you'll start Michael Gallup over Noah Brown.
Oh,
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Without hesitation. Just Michael Gallup. He's a much better bet to score a touchdown than Noah Brown. Noah Brown gets targets, but he's not anywhere the threat that Michael Gallup is, especially once you get down in the red zone. They routinely throw fades to him. So he has a much higher touchdown upside, Michael Gallup does, than Noah Brown. That one's not even a question for me.
Okay, good. And then we have Elijah Moore at 19 here. Another deep, play if you need somebody. We saw Juju, not really get it done out of the slot this past week against the Seahawks. Okay, so keep that in mind going into this week with Elijah Moore coming out of the slot as well. However, route participation is there, talent is there, and the Jets just have to win this game. So Elijah Moore is an option if you're desperate. And then we have a Hassan. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I wonder, this is just a season-long question. We're kind of jumping, not season-long, but maybe next season.
Oh,
Elijah Moore. Do you think there's a chance for a revival if they get an actual quarterback? I mean, I know Mike White.
Hell yeah.
He's an actual quarterback. Sure. But
hell yeah.
if they go get somebody like, I don't want to say Lamar Jackson, but there's a chance, depending on how contract negotiation goes there. I wonder how involved Elijah Moore will be next season. Like, I don't think the Jets are giving up on him. Do you?
I think it's not about the quarterback. I think it's about Elijah Moore. Honestly,
Okay.
as long as it's not Zach Wilson, I should preface that.
Yeah.
Because Jack Wilson is not a capable quarterback at all right now, right? And you just need a capable quarterback. I think for someone like Elijah Moore, who has the type of talent he has, you know what? I'll be honest with you, man. I was a big fan of Elijah Moore coming into this year. I think the reason why Elijah Moore didn't have a good year is because of Elijah Moore. Is because he might have come into the season thinking that he was the shit. You know what I'm saying? He might have come into the season thinking that he's the number one. I went to camp. I talked to Elijah Moore. I tried to talk to him. He was a little diva to me.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to lie. He was being a little diva to me. I was on the field with him. I was right next to him. He was, being a little diva. No one else did. Garrett Wilson, the most humble dude on the planet. You know what I'm saying?
He's a rookie. What's he
is a rookie, but but dude, there was night and day. When you talk about it. And Corey Davis, the nicest dude in the world. You know what I'm saying?
He's a veteran. He's been around. Yeah,
he's been around. He's cool. But Elijah Moore, I felt like he had some. He was up there. Like his head, was like really big.
You tried telling him for us, Garrett Wilson, he's number one, but he didn't take it.
I don't know, man. Like it's funny because I think he ate some, like, as you would say, he had that humble pie.
Yeah.
This year, and I think coming into next year, like I said, I think he could be on that Brandon Ayuk career arc, where second year, first year showed a lot of promise, just like Elijah Moore did. Second year, doghouse, not so great year. Third year, I think Elijah Moore can potentially, work harder this offseason to prove that you are capable of being a number one wide receiver, right? And then come through, because I think he is capable, but he took a big step back this year. And I think, coming into next year, I think him and Garrett Wilson could become a serious 1-2 punch. Right. I would say, so I know Elijah Moore is going to go super late in drafts. I'm taking that shot again.
Yeah.
just like we were taking shots with Brandon Ayuk this year, right? Going in the 9th round.
Yeah. I did say,
I think that was worth it. Obviously now with Brock Purdy, not so much, but before that, he was doing really well.
I think I remember I did say going into this season or over the offseason when they drafted Garrett Wilson, I said they didn't draft him to play behind Elijah Moore. So yeah, it doesn't look like that was. It looks like that was the case. That they didn't draft
Garrett Wilson's that dude.
But
I firmly believe, and I'm still going to hold on to this, that Elijah Moore is not. He's not having the type of year, not because Garrett Wilson showed out, is so super talented. I think it's because of himself. I think both Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore could have killed it this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think Elijah Moore, it's also just magnified, obviously struggles that he's had with the quarterback situation in New York. Obviously all that turnover and having a week-to-week inconsistency, like it's just going to make him look worse. Because every 100%. Time you start to warm up a quarterback, he's out with an injury or he gets benched. So it's like, that's the way it's been in New York for a while too. So obviously not the most ideal situation, but hopefully they can lock down that quarterback situation. Because I do like Elijah Moore too, as far as a talent perspective. I remember watching those training camp videos of him one-handing catches, and stuff like that. I was like, man, the breakout is upon us, and it's just been quiet this season. So I still trust him. I hope he sticks around on the Jets, but we'll see. Free agency is weird. We'll see what happens. He's not going to be a free agent.
He still has a couple years.
Yeah, trades. I don't know. I don't know how much you're going to get for him in a trade at this point. It probably isn't worth it.
It's not. Just keep him. He's a talented wide receiver. Hassan Haskins at 20. And he's only here, like we mentioned earlier. Derrick Henry didn't practice yesterday. Titans don't really have any reasons to play Derrick Henry this week, so they could rest starters. They could rest him, just to kind of keep him prepared and ready for their week 18 matchup against the Jaguars. It's very possible. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So, that's pretty much it. I mean, like I mentioned with Haskins, like I don't trust Haskins this week.
Yeah,
but he's somebody to pick up just in case you're desperate at the running back position.
Yeah,
because with Malik Willis, it's really tough to trust that offense.
That would be a desperate play if you're putting Hassan Haskins in. It's not because Dallas has been fantastic against the run. They have not. But just like you said, the ceiling for this offense is not very high. Although I wouldn't be surprised. Dallas has played teams at rock bottom before, Green Bay, and they had a big game. So Christian Watson breakout, that's when that happened. So we'll see. I don't think a Hassan Haskins breakout is going to happen, but maybe he puts up respectable numbers. You can add him as, perspective add just in case Derrick Henry doesn't go. I don't think they're going to play a whole lot of starters because regardless of whether they win or lose or the Jaguars win or lose, It's just the division is on the line in week 18. So it
Exactly.
doesn't matter what happens this week. I wouldn't be surprised to see them just rest all their starters. Not
And that's
all,
going to do it,
but
guys.
most.
That's going to
Yeah.
do it for this waiver wire episode. Actually, should we go over some quarterback streamers, dude? Let's go over some just in case.
Yeah, we
you know,
can.
if you're in the finals, most likely you have your quarterback. But let's just go over some quarterback streamers before we sign off here. You know, let me ask you a question, man. Like, you're obviously done with Russell Wilson, right? Like, there's no way.
Yep. Yeah. No, I'm done.
There's absolutely no way. Okay. Okay. Good.
Did you see who they elevated to be the interim head coach on the Broncos staff? I don't know his name, but it's the clock management strategist that they elevated to be the head coach.
You mean the guy who's been terrible this year?
Yeah.
At that job?
Who's been advising Nathaniel Hackett on his time management.
Oh, geez.
And everybody was clowning him for that. And then the other thing, just also because since we're talking about quarterbacks too, Tua, he did enter the concussion protocol.
He
Did you see that? So like,
I did. Yeah.
maybe that's not a conspiracy theory. Maybe that's what happened because I know I talked about that yesterday. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. So Teddy Bridgewater, you know, could be somebody that you potentially stream this week, you know, given the fact that they do have some really good weapons there, right? Teddy Bridgewater going up against New England, you know, could be a potential streamer. But who would you rather stream? Would you rather stream Brock Purdy this week against the Raiders?
I'd take Brock Purdy. The way they're playing, it's just such a perfect system to just be an efficient, you know, 15, 16 point quarterback. And that's what he's been. He's not turning the ball over. You don't have to worry about negative points like you do with Nick Foles, like you did last week, or last night. I think Brock Purdy, he's been a good streamer. He's been on my radar, you know, this whole time. I
think Daniel Jones too against Indy at home. Yep. I think that's a solid play. Mike White against Seattle, man. Like, I don't know. You know, I know that they need to get the job done.
Yeah.
But how are you feeling about that one?
The matchup doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence, but I think that he can get it done. We've seen him in this offense before, and they put up points, you know, regardless of who they're playing against.
Who would you rather play, Mike White or Brock Purdy?
I like Mike White. I think his upside is much higher, but Brock Purdy's like the secure thing.
Right.
Hopefully you're not making this decision if you're in the championship. Hopefully you're not reduced to this, but yeah, we'll see. I mean,
you might. I'm obviously playing like guys like Jared Goff, you know, guys like that over you know, over all these guys that we just mentioned, right?
Yeah.
I'm probably playing him over Daniel Jones.
Don't try Malik Willis on Thursday. That's a given.
Don't do that. What about Mac Jones against Miami? Are you into that at all?
I in a pinch. He has a floor that's all right.
Just in case all these guys are not available, I guess.
Yeah, things have to work perfectly for Mac Jones to have a good fantasy day. And they have not been going very well. Things haven't been going very well the past couple of weeks.
There has to be deflected passes in the end zone
to Jacoby
Myers
for
him to do his thing. Jacoby Myers has been very interesting over the past couple of weeks.
He's been on a bit of a roller coaster ride. Yeah,
there's nobody who's started him this past week. You know, obviously after what happened the week before.
It's amazing. He gets doghoused in fantasy for something that, you know, obviously he lost -2 points and it cost some people some games, but he got doghoused just for that one play. You know, where the rest of the season he's been all right.
Let me ask you this: you know, if Jalen Hurts is out again, where would you put Gardner Minshew? You know, with all these guys that we just mentioned at the top.
Yeah.
He's going up against New Orleans this week.
I think he is like a beefed up, higher upside version of Brock Purdy because, again, the offense around him is very good. He has plenty of weapons. The offensive line's good. Obviously, they take a hit with Lane Johnson being out, but I'm not too worried about it. We saw him. He was mobile. He was able to extend plays. I'm not worried about Gardner Minshew at all. I think he has a really nice ceiling this week. So I'm starting Gardner Minshew over all those guys. There's a good chance if you had Jalen Hurts, you probably picked him up. And he served pretty much almost as a 1-for-1 replacement. He just didn't have the rushing upside. Faraz, you're muted.
Sorry.
You're good. I tried signaling with my hand. I was like turning the volume down.
I wasn't even looking at you.
But yeah.
Top streaming tight ends this week. You know, we talked about Tyler Conklin. We talked about Juwan Johnson. Cade Otton took a little bit of a lead in that tight end room between him and Cameron Brate, like maybe. Greg Dulcich against Kansas City, but he's banged up. He has a hamstring injury. So monitor that in case you were depending on him.
Yeah.
You know, he's available in some leagues. Noah Fant would be the next one up. Trey McBride, maybe a little sneaky, because he's going up against Atlanta this week, but that's if you're super desperate, and that's really about it.
But what about
it.
Shane Zylstra?
Guys, don't pick up Shane Zylstra.
No.
Okay.
No.
It was very fluky. His 3-touchdown game.
Yeah.
Okay. Good luck this week, guys.
Oh,
all right.
Did anybody DM you with pictures of Shane Zylstra in their lineup?
No. No.
Right.
No one DM'd me. I got 0 DMs on that. So no, didn't happen. 0% started this past week. We'll be back tomorrow with our quarterback and running back rankings. So let's get it, man. Let's get it to a championship week, to a championship trophy. Let's get it, guys. All right. We'll be back tomorrow. See you guys later. Hope you guys get who you want in your waivers. See you later. Bye-bye.